everyone, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. We're excited to have you here today for the webinar, Unlock the Potential of Your HR Solution, Improving Employee Relations. Today, our presenter is Maria Swarchowski from Highland Software. Before we get started, we just have a couple of housekeeping items to go over. You'll notice that right now all the phone lines are muted. We are recording this session, so in an effort to make that recording as clean as possible, we're going to keep all the lines muted. If you do have a question, though, we would love to hear it, and you're welcome to type it into the GoToMeeting chat panel, and we'll get to as many questions as we can throughout the webinar. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Maria to get us started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about human resources today, and specifically employee relations. My name is Maria Swarchowski, and I am a sales engineer here at Highland. My background is actually in human resources, though. So I worked as an OnBase end user in our own HR department here at Highland prior to moving over into this role. So what we'll do today is we'll talk a little bit about just generally OnBase for human resources, and give you an idea of what OnBase can do for human resources. Talk a little bit about what a phased approach might look like, how employee relations falls in to that type of a phased approach, and then we'll dive right into talking about what employee relations is and how OnBase can take a case management approach towards handling all of the pieces and parts that make up that employee relations process. And we'll talk also a little bit about how our internal HR department here at Highland uses that case management tool to manage employee relations here as well. So what you can see on my screen, this is a overview really of all of the places that OnBase, well, many of the places that OnBase can touch a human resources department. When we talk about OnBase for HR, we almost always start with a discussion about the employee files. Where are those files? How can we help you manage an entire employee record from just one single platform? How can we move towards digitizing those employee files and securing those employee files? How can we make sure that those files are easily accessed and routed through processes and for approvals when needed? And how do we make sure, that's kind of that first section there, but as we move forward, how do we make sure that those records are then secure within OnBase, and also that we're able to support any retention requirements or retention policies that you might have in place today? So that, at its most basic, is where we usually start a discussion for OnBase and human resources. So to those of you on the phone that are already using OnBase for HR, that's wonderful. You might have some of those first steps covered. This slide is meant to kind of expand that for you and paint that vision for you of how you can maybe expand OnBase through other areas of human resources, such as managing the creation and approval, distribution and acknowledgement tracking of policies and procedures, or tackling some HR specific processes like onboarding and offboarding, and even as we'll be talking about most today, that employee relations process and how we can take a case management approach towards ensuring that you are helping avoid risks surrounding legal requirements in those cases, how we can make sure that those employees are having a good experiences with the HR department and the company as a whole, and how we can give you that big picture view into what is happening for those cases. So it's important whenever we talk about human resources and OnBase to just kind of get to the basics to help you understand. And many of you may already know this if you are using OnBase today, and also if you've deployed OnBase for an HR solution, that we are able to manage that very granular level of security that's necessary for those sensitive HR documents. We can support that role-based security. We can integrate with the existing systems that you have in place, whether that's an HRIS system or an applicant tracking system or other HR systems that you might have in place. We have the ability, with our integration tools. The great thing about OnBase is we really don't care what those systems are. we can integrate with them. We have tools to do that. We can make sure that those systems are on the same page. And in many cases, we can also almost be, like the glue between those two systems when necessary. A lot of times we see HR has a lot of different processes in place, a lot of different systems managing those processes. And with OnBase, we're able to fill in the gaps where maybe some of those systems fall short. And I think one great example of that is the employee relations process that we're going to talk about today. There aren't a lot of systems that manage this process or that do it well and that can meet the requirements necessary for human resources. So that's where we're going to, focus our presentation on today. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them. We're happy to answer those as we go throughout the process. But what we really wanted to talk about today is, what is employee relations and what does that process look like? How can OnBase help? What are the benefits to you? So we'll start by just talking a little bit about, what is employee relations? So if an employee, and you'll hear this a lot of times, that the employees are a company's biggest and best asset, right? So if employees are a company's best asset, then managing the relationship between the employee and the employer is a very, oftentimes a very important initiative for companies today. So, this is a picture of the employees here at Highland that was taken really recently. And it's a big focus for Highland. Our employees are a huge focus. Anyone that knows a little bit about our culture knows that we have a whole team focused on the engagement of employees, right? And so the employee relations term is really an umbrella term that helps manage, that relationship with employees. So a lot of times it's making sure that communications between employees, that relationships with employees are all in good standing and intact. So those are some of the focus. But part of the employee relations function is also, it's not just, managing that good communication and fostering those good relationships. It's also involves managing, open, fair, and honest resolution of any employee issues that might come up, any, incidents that might take place, right? So it sounds easy. Managing employees can't be that hard. Well, what we've seen in the industry this year, in the news this year, really, is that there have been a few examples of employee relations gone wrong. And these have been some pretty high-profile examples. So we wanted to just use some of those as an introduction to talk a little bit about, kind of the dark side of employee relations and what can happen if an employee relations with employees within a company kind of go wrong. So one of the most famous examples is Fox News. So many of you might be familiar with the allegations against the CEO of Fox News over the past year or so. And what was, the allegations, of course, were shocking, and the news focused heavily on those allegations. But what was also focused on in the news media was HR's handling of those allegations. So we absolutely have learned from this year that inconsistent processes for handling those employee relations issues, grievances, complaints, as in this case, these were harassment complaints, or really any areas of misconduct. And if those are handled poorly, that can be part of the story too. It isn't really just about what happened with that company, what the allegations are, but it's how HR took those areas of misconduct and then handled them. Another great example is Uber. So this is one of the most, I think, talked about examples this year, but there was an engineer that worked for Uber, and she made allegations of discrimination and sexism and retaliation against Uber. She actually brought these claims initially to HR, and HR, HR really mishandled these claims. They said that these claims against her supervisor could not be investigated. There couldn't be a resolution because of them, because this person was in a position of influence. And so, she kind of moved on. There was another allegation of misconduct. She took that to HR. Again, HR did not act. And that's when she took to a blog to talk about her experience with Uber. And again, it wasn't just about the misconduct in this case, it was about how HR handled that misconduct. That was a story in the news. And in both cases, you know, the CEO was let go, and there were some pretty big ramifications on those companies. So these are great examples in the news media this year of just employee relations and how they can be handled poorly and go wrong. So what we wanted to talk about with you here today is some of the challenges that you may be facing with your employee relations process and how OnBase can handle some of that. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to talk about these challenges, and then I'll show you how OnBase can tackle those with a brief demonstration as well. So some of the biggest challenges surrounding the employee relations process just start with the handling of that situation. So, you know, in a typical process, especially if it's a paper-based process, what happens is an incident or an issue is reported in some fashion. That might be, you know, stopping by someone's desk and letting them know that you have a complaint. That might be HR, a meeting that you have with HR. It could be an email that you send to human resources. It could be a form that you fill out. It could be an anonymous hotline call. There's many different ways that these issues and complaints come in, and that's one of the biggest challenges to start off with employee relations, is how do we receive that incident, and then how from there do we kick off a case and investigate all of the pieces and parts that need to be investigated surrounding that place. So typically we have the incident that takes place. There are some sample incidents under here. You know, it could be a grievance, it could be a workplace misconduct, it might be a policy violation, it could be a complaint about an existing supervisor or manager. There are so many different examples of what an incident could be. But once that incident takes place and it's reported, HR is required to open an investigation into that grievance. And that investigation, as it takes place, there's lots of different components that need to be taken into account. It isn't just the documents. So there may very well be documents associated with this case. It could be performance improvement plans. It could be performance reviews. It might be, you know, emails or other documents that you might want to keep as part of this case. But it's also, you know, the activities that take place surrounding the case, the meetings that take place to investigate the incidents, the notes that need to be captured in order to make sure that all of the different employees that are working on this case in human resources are on the same page. And at some point, you know, there's an action taken, whether that's, you know, having a conversation with that employee or that supervisor or terminating that employee. And then from there, that issue is resolved. So this is kind of talking through all of the steps of an employee relations or incident that can take place. But with a paper-based process or without a consistent process in place to manage employee relations, many of these steps might be skipped. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the ramifications of that and how that can impact the employee as well as the investigation and also any legal risk that can happen in tandem with skipping any pieces and parts of this process. So when an incident takes place and when an investigation kicks off, typically what we see, I mean, some of the challenges we've heard from our customers and some of the challenges that we even saw internally here at Highland were that the case information was living in many different places, right? So one of the biggest challenges that we see with our customers and internally here at Highland was where do we manage all of the information associated with the case? A lot of times and internally here, we were tracking it through emails and Microsoft Word documents and spreadsheets to track the status of the cases and, you know, paper forms that maybe individuals needed to fill out and sign and needed to be routed around the organization. So the biggest challenge is that when information lives in many different places, it can be very hard for someone to get a quick big picture view of what's happening with this specific case. And if information is living in all these places, then if an employee has an inquiry into how their case is going or how it's being handled or what the status is, HR has to go to many different places to find that information out. And that can be a bad, or a poor, really experience for that employee. And when we talked earlier about how employees are a company's biggest asset, well, having a poor experience with an issue or an incident that really disturbed you or you felt strongly about can really make that employee have a bad perception of that relationship and even ultimately of the company. And as the more we focus on employee engagement in the industry, the more this becomes a focus for companies. So I think one of the most important challenges that our customers and internally that we face here at Highland is just, all right, so we have a case, we have information living in different places, but what happens when, maybe a lawsuit, what happens when a litigation is kicked off? Maybe it's a result of terminating that employee as a result of an investigation, or maybe that employee left on their own and then decides to sue the company. Either way, whenever legal gets wind of a litigation, what they're going to do is they're actually going to call HR and they're going to say, all right, give me every single thing that you have on this individual, every single thing that's associated with this case. And this slide makes it look really easy, right? We just hand over a file with all of the information surrounding that case, and it's no big deal, right? Well, we talked about all those different places that information can live earlier, and I think that's an important thing to note, is that information lives in all these different places, so it can be a big challenge for HR to pull all that together very quickly in the time that legal needs that information in order to be able to correctly investigate a case. So, as I mentioned, HR is required to track and monitor all employee relations cases. It is illegal to discriminate against employees who complain of harassment or discrimination, or those might be incidents that would take place. So that's why each case needs to be carefully investigated and documented. And the better an employer is at this, the more the employee feels that relationship with the company is good, and that increases their morale. And HR, the goal is always to provide a consistent and fair approach to investigating these cases, but again, also to meet those company goals, such as reducing the risk of lawsuits or improving the odds of winning an employee lawsuit. And that is improved greatly if you don't have to go to 10 different places to find the information that you're looking for, or multiple sources to put together a complete big picture view of what's going on in this case. And even worse, if you're missing components, that can definitely open you up for risk. And also, I'd have to just touch on security again. With a paper-based process, there's no way to prove who's accessed this content, that it was kept secure, and that's something that we're going to help with OnBase as well. In HR, we say if it is not documented, it didn't happen, right? That's just something that we hear, and that's something that for this particular process, it's very impactful. If we don't have documentation of it, it's very hard to prove that took place. But I think taking this one step further is, it's great to document, but it can also be very risky to have poor documentation surrounding a case. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and how we can help control some of the documentation that's associated with the case, and again, reduce the risk of opening ourselves up for any kind of legal risk surrounding these different cases. So we wanted to talk today about just a case management approach to employee relations, and how we can use this case management tool to provide that information that a case worker might be looking for, to provide that big picture view into, not just the status of the case, but activities related to the case, and documents related to the case, and data related to the case, and provide that ability to report on, trends and bottlenecks that might be happening as a result of, a group of incidents. So with OnBase, what we can do is, we're going to take that case management approach by first providing the big picture view into all cases, right? So when a case is kicked off, it's going to be created within OnBase, but OnBase is going to be able to pull all the information surrounding any other existing open cases for that caseworker to be able to use a dashboard, a real-time dynamic dashboard, to drill down and say, okay, I have 30 incidents open, and I can see that 20 of these incidents happened in this specific location under this specific manager. That's a big number. That's something I want to look into, right? We want to be able to provide those reporting tools to human resources so they are able to identify trends that might be taking place, improve processes surrounding the employee relations, surrounding making changes even to policies and to better protect those employees. And we also want to give HR the ability not to just see the big picture view of all of the open cases and be able to drill down into specifics, but we want to be able to choose and open one specific case. So here, we might have a dynamic dashboard view. HR is able to choose one specific case, and from there, they can open that case, and they're able to see all that brief snapshot of information that they need. All right, who is the case regarding? What was the incident that took place? Is there a checklist associated with this incident that I need to complete in order to, fully work this process from start to finish and make sure it's consistent with other processes that I might be working on today? What is the status of this case? Has this individual been ever, accused of other incidents in the past, right? Have any other incidents taken place or any other investigations been launched against this individual in the past? And what is that big picture view of this employee, right? Do we have supporting documentation? If so, we want to collect it within the case. We want to make sure that HR has just one place to go to see this information. We want to be able to showcase related information that might be helpful to those HR workers in making decisions surrounding this case. And we also want to be able to track activities and notes in the case as well, so that again, HR or any HR workers that are collaborating on this case are able to go ahead and see exactly, pick up exactly where that last caseworker left off and be able to, have those answers readily available in front of them towards moving the case forward. And what I love about, using a case management foundation for managing the employee relations process is that there could be different requirements, different components depending on the type of case that there is. So if there's certain incidents that take place, we're still going to have that case management foundation to be able to have that reporting, to collaborate with different individuals, to track the status, and to record activities that take place. But the requirements for that specific type of incident might be different than if we were kicking off a case where a performance improvement plan was part of that process, or maybe a grievance might look different. The process for managing a grievance might look different than the process for managing a different type of incident. And so, this case management foundation gives us the flexibility in order to make sure that we can provide that one-stop shop for all those components of managing the employee relations process, but that if different parts of the process warrant different actions that need to be taken, we can support that as well. So, benefits of using OnBase, I could list many here. These are just a few that kind of came up, but the benefits of using OnBase for employee relations, I mean, we've talked about some of these, but some of the most important are really just being able to protect that employee's privacy. That audit trail that we have on every single document within OnBase, on every process, being able to report and say, all right, I can prove that this case was kept confidential because only these 3 individuals viewed the components of this case within OnBase. That privacy, securing that related information is key when we're talking about sensitive issues such as employee relations issues. And just really being able to improve HR's ability to, launch those investigations, to have a complete view of all the information, and to improve the resolution of issues, right? We're able to strengthen that employee-employer relationship by providing HR with the tools to communicate to those employees, right? Every step in the process, we want to make sure that those employees are getting a notification, letting them know that their case is being worked on, that we care about them, that this issue is being taken seriously, so that we absolutely can have that good relationship between employee and employer. And again, this is all wonderful, but in the end, it does help us safeguard against that legal risk and report on trends that might give us the tool to make changes to processes to better an organization in the future as well. So, when you're thinking about, is this a good fit for me? Is this something that I can use in my organization? Is this something that matches our process? These are some good, you might be hearing this from your HR department. You might be hearing this from individuals. I want to be able to, capture all the information surrounding an incident that takes place, right? It's not just a document following through an approval process. It's being able to capture and organize evidence surrounding that case. We talked about the audit trail and security and information sharing between the different groups. These are just some cues to listen for, to be able to clue you in that this might be a good solution for your organization. And again, that visibility in reporting to identify trends as well. And I just wanted to mention, before we start with the demonstration, our case management solution, this is one example of how we can use case management in human resources. We also see case management used for onboarding and offboarding and for many different other processes throughout the enterprise, throughout an organization, and some of those are mentioned here. So what you'll see today is just an example of how case management can tackle this specific process. But as you view the demonstration, keep in mind that this can absolutely be expanded into other areas within human resources and across the organization as well. So I am going to pause here just to see if there are any questions. And what we'll do is we'll jump into, if you can give me a second to kind of switch over, we'll jump into a demonstration just so you can see in real-time practice kind of what this looks like. And we'll talk a little bit about, how it came to be. Actually, I could share this story briefly while we're waiting to see if there are any questions. How it came to be that HR started using case management to track employee relations here within the organization. It's a great story. When I moved to the sales team, I worked with an individual here, and in our Solution Experience Center, we created, it was really, it's a lot more simple than the employee relations process that we're going to show here today with case management, but it was a use of case management for employee relations. And what we did was we ended up showing it internally to our HR department here at Highland, and they said, I want that, right? So they built out, a case management solution to manage employee relations. We talked to them a little bit about other ways they could expand, for instance, using case management to manage the FMLA process and employee leave. So from there, HR was able to expand into, other areas of human resources, just taking that tool and then being able to expand to capture all that information. So if there aren't any questions so far, no? Okay, wonderful. Well, let's hop into.
Actually, Maria, sorry, we just had one question come through. Will the demonstration include example of the employee file module as well?
Oh, just to repeat the question, will the demonstration include a demo of the employee file management?
The employee file module was the wording of it.
Okay. we don't have an employee file module. It's based, I mean, if you own OnBase today, you can use OnBase to get started and manage your employee files, right? It's just a basic foldering structure. So that's the great news for, you know, for the individuals on this call, is you can get started with what you have today, and with some best practice module recommendations, you can tackle that employee file. You know, those best practice modules might help with reporting or compliance, just maybe some additions to what you may have in place today, or you might even have all the components. But this demonstration was going to be specifically around employee relations. But I am going to show you how you can pull the employee file from the employee record. So what we'll do is we can spend just a quick second kind of talking about some of the pieces and parts of employee file management, but it's not going to be, you know, a highlight of the presentation here today. Any other questions that came through?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So where we're going to get started here is we're going to talk about how we might kick off a case, and then how OnBase will automate that process for us, generate the case, and provide that big picture view into all of the, you know, contextual data surrounding that case. So what you see here, this is our smart client. I, you know, have a few colored tiles in the middle. I could search through those tiles, or I can also, from the ribbon at the top, I know I want to search for employee relations, and this is kind of my dashboard of shortcuts into OnBase. I can also type ahead, and as I start to type employee relations, that form will come up for me. So OnBase has selected and highlighted that form for me. I'm going to open it and just show you kind of how a case can be kicked off. So what you see on my screen is an example of a Unity form. These are very easy to build. Probably one of the first things I did when I came to sales was learn how to build Unity forms. And, you know, I came over without a technical background, so they are very easy to do. In this case, we have a number of required fields on this form. Required fields are, you can tell that they're required because they have the red asterisk next to those fields. And we have these required fields because we want to make sure that these pieces of information are submitted with this form. We're not going to allow a user to submit the form without those pieces of information, and that's for a variety of reasons. I mean, we want to capture that information up front that's going to be necessary in order to kick off a case. So I'm going to type in an employee ID, tab over. When I tab over, OnBase is going to fill in the rest of the information for me, right? We want to leverage autofills whenever we can within OnBase, and especially within human resources, to avoid any type of errors that might take place with too much manual entry of data. So I, you know, will say that I am an individual who has received a complaint from an employee, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to submit a form to kick off a case and an investigation. So we'll say that the type of case that we're kicking off was a policy violation, and we'll say that this was a harassment allegation that happened at Building 3. Here I have the ability to attach supporting documentation if I need to. So if there was supporting documentation that I needed to attach as a result of this case, I could, you know, add it here. We've hard-coded the submitter's name. So I'm logged in as HR, which is why you see HR there. But if this was a real life scenario, it would say my name and it would be hard-coded. I wouldn't be able to make any changes there. So we're saying, you know, I'm Maria Swarhowski. I filled out this form. I'm, you know, or if I'm, you know, for a complaint that I received from Dan Dobson, and now I'm going to go ahead and sign the document. We'll sign the document and then submit it into the system. So OnBase is going to ask me if I'd like to create another form. I'll say no. And what we'll do here is we're going to actually hop into the case management tool to see how this form kicked off a case, and then how HR is going to work that case from start to finish. So I access this form from directly within OnBase, but I mean, if you have an existing website where you'd like to throw this form up there, you could certainly do that. You can kick off forms from Outlook or even directly within you know, your HRIS tool if you needed to. So those are just a few options of how forms could be kicked off. But that's typically what we see in the industry is the need to capture the incident on a form, which then generates a case. So while we were submitting the form, OnBase was working on the back end to create a case for us, to pull all the information for us associated with that case, and provide it to us in, an easy to view format so that we have all the information we need to go forward and work that case. So what you can see on the screen here is I have all open cases presented to me in my dashboard view. So on the left-hand side, those are my different filters, right? This is essentially, these are my reports on how I can report on information. I can see all unassigned cases, those cases that haven't been assigned to HR yet. I can view all open cases. I can view, get really granular and say I want to view all harassment cases at building 3 if I'd like to. I have those options here on the left-hand side of the screen. And these are really, those filters are really like built-in reporting tools. And what I love about them is they take that data and they automatically turn it into a dashboard view for us. So that's what you're seeing in the middle of the screen. In this case, I have all open cases highlighted here at the top in the middle, and I'm sorting by primary employee last name and subtype. So in my bar graph at the top, you can see I have employees Anderson and Dobson who have cases against them. And on the right-hand side of the screen, this is the subtype. So if I were to hover over Dan Dobson and harassment, I can see that there are 2 counts of harassment. 2 incidents of harassment against Dan Dobson. And if I were to select any of these, different sections, OnBase is going to drill down on the right-hand side of the screen. And if I want to at any time, I can refresh this list to go back to my original view. So this dashboard, again, this is not a separate solution. This is built into our case management tool. Nobody had to go build this dashboard. We just take that information from the filters and we actually present it in a dashboard view. So I want to talk a little bit more before we dive into the case, just about how you can use this reporting tool to be able to get the information that's most impactful to you quickly. So on the left-hand side of the screen, I can use filters for searching. So if I want to search, I don't want to look at all the cases. I don't want to look at the dashboard, right? All I want to do is find all the cases for Dan Dobson. I can type in Dan's name, his last name, and search, and there are all the cases available to me specifically for Dan Dobson, right? I have the ability to view those very quickly and can search if I need to pull different cases up. I also have the ability to view, let's say, all harassment cases at Building 1. So there I'm getting pretty granular. I'm drilling down to try to identify trends in what might be happening with these types of incidents at the different locations. And if there's a filter that doesn't exist here, these are predefined filters. We've built these filters out. If I want to view my information in a different way, I have the ability to create filters on the fly. Again, only if you want your users to have rights and privileges to do so will they be able to do this, but I can actually create a filter if I'd like. So I have the option to create my own filter. I can call it whatever I want. We'll call it Maria's filter just for the purposes of this demonstration. I can say, all right, I want to be able to report on cases. And here's where I can pick what components are important for me to be able to report on. So maybe what's important to me is I want to be able to sort by primary employee last name, right? That's important to me. I just double click on that. It ends up here on the right-hand side of my screen. Maybe status is important. Again, I can double click and add that there. Time to close might be something that is important to me, or maybe I just want to see those cases that are mine, right? So I can say I want to sort by last name as well, or get a big picture view of HR and who's working what types of cases. And from here I could continue to add to my report if I'd like, but we'll just save this. You can now see that I have as part of my list Maria's filter. I'm able to pull up all the information in this view. You can see I only have 4 columns here. Those are the 4 that I chose when creating my own filter. If I want to sort, maybe status, I want to sort by status. I mean, this list is pretty consumable. It's pretty short, but if it was 300 cases long, I could take any of these columns at the top and drag up. And now I'm going to be sorting by status. If I want to, I can take this information and quickly display it in a dashboard view. So the idea is to give you the tools to slice and dice this information in the way that is most meaningful to you. So we're actually going to go to all unassigned cases next, and you'll see I have 2 cases in here. One of them is the case that we just submitted. So let's open that. So we submitted that electronic form. On the back end, what OnBase was doing was generating a case number. You can see that here on the top left-hand side, recording all that information that we had on the electronic form, the type, the subtype, the date, and then starting to build out this big picture for us. You'll notice we have a status here marked as initial review. So this means that this has come, the next step after submitting a case, submitting that form, is that the case is added to an unassigned bucket, right? And what we want to do is we want to tell that individual in HR that they need to start working this case. So could this happen automatically? Absolutely. All cases that were, in this location could be assigned automatically to a certain individual in HR. But in this case, we have marked it as initial review because we want to actually assign the case. So we're going to browse out. OnBase is going to give us a list of the different individuals in HR that can be assigned to this case. I'm going to add one. We'll say that Cindy Smith is going to work this case, and now I'm going to save it. And once I save this information, what you'll notice is that the status on the left-hand side has changed from initial review to in progress. So right away, I know that this case has been assigned to me. It's been removed from my list. It's no longer here. And we're able to, let that individual, through the use of automated notifications, know that they have a case to work. It looks like there's an old case in here, so I'm going to open this up. And I'll show you how powerful workflow can be on the back end. So one other thing you'll notice on the case is that it's showing the date opened, but the date closed and the time to close are empty. So what we have the ability to do is put workflow on the back end. So there's 2 options with workflow here on this case. And again, all of this is configurable to meet your needs. Everything you see today is just an example of how this can look. But I have the ability to escalate to upper management. So I know when I worked in HR, if a particularly sensitive case came in, probably somebody was going to want to let the VP of HR know about it. And we can do that rather than walking over to that individual's office or giving them a call. We can do that with workflow. We can escalate that to upper management so that that VP gets a notification right away to let them know that something needs their attention and a case needs their attention. But we also have the option to close the case. So you can see at the top, if I run the task to close that case, what OnBase is going to do is automatically populate the date closed for me and then automatically calculate the time to close on that case as well. So we're able to, this would be a really long time to close a case, but we're able to, showcase that and make sure that that's recorded. We could capture resolution if we wanted to at this point. All of that can be recorded. So what we want to do next is we've shown a little bit of the big picture view. I'm going to display this information as a filter just so you have another way to see it. So here, again, that's just my dashboard displayed in a filtered view. And I'm going to open that case. We want to dive a little bit deeper into the case for you. So what we can see here, again, we've kind of gone through that brief snapshot of the case. We know OnBase has automatically generated the case number. We've added the individual who's assigned to work on it. But if I'm in HR and I'm Cindy Smith, I'm assigned to work on this case, what I now need is information. So I want to be able to say, all right, Dan Dobson has been accused of harassment. Has he ever been accused of harassment before? What is the story behind this employee? How am I going to get to that information? So we can present all of that to you directly from the case. So rather than going to another system to grab information, all I have to do is actually double click on Dan's name. And what OnBase is, let me expand this so you can see. What OnBase is going to pull back for me is Dan's employee record. So here we've provided additional information on the employee, right? What's their position? What department are they working in? Who is their manager? Down here, you can see any related cases. So all of these are 4 related cases where, Dan was a primary employee. He was an employee that was the target of an issue or an investigation, right? So it sounds like we have a little bit of an issue going on here with Dan. If Dan was a part of a different investigation, but he wasn't the primary employee necessarily, maybe he was a witness to a case, that would populate down here under secondary employee. So we can not only track the individuals, one individual associated with an investigation, but we can also link individuals together to make sure that you get the big picture view of who participated in the investigation of that case, who might have been a part of that investigation or that incident as it took place. All of that is available to us here. We also have the ability to view the employee file. So for whoever asked that question earlier, I want to point your attention to the ribbon at the top where I can see and access the employee file folder. So here, again, without ever leaving this view, I'm able to access the employee file for Dan, and I can see the documents associated with his employee file. We can see the folder structure on the top left-hand side. In this case, we have 4 different folders within Dan's employee file. That's what you see on the top left. Underneath that, you'll see the documents that OnBase expects within that particular folder. So, I could do a whole demonstration, on employee file management. It is the key to starting out in human resources, but some of the very brief benefits that I can mention for employee file management here are that ability to identify missing documents. So we can identify documents that are missing with the employee folder. You could even be running workflow on the back end to check for missing documents and email someone letting them know documents are missing if that's something that's of use to you. We can run reports to say, hey, show me every single employee in the company that's missing this type of document, so we can give you the big picture reporting ability on these documents. We also can make sure that we apply role-based security to these employee files, so only the right users have access to documents, access to file folders and file cabinets and searches and functionality on these documents. We can apply retention to these records, and we can automate as much or as little of that process as you'd like to make sure that we can support any retention policy that you have in place, whether your retention requirements are time-based or whether they're event-based retention requirements. And we can support, placing employee files on hold, maybe in the case of an audit or a litigation. So that's a very high-level overview of what we can do with the employee file, but similar to how that case was automatically generated when I submitted that form, as OnBase receives word that a new hire has been hired into the company, this folder structure can be automatically generated, and it can differ based on position and location and things like that. And we can work together with whatever HRIS system you have in place to make sure that those two systems are on the same page. So, here's where you get that access to the employee file. I want to go back to the case and just show you, that was the whole employee file. But if I wanted to see documents associated with this case, I also have the ability to see only the documents that are associated with this specific case. Not all the documents, not the entire employee file, just documents that are associated with this case. In this example, we really have one document so far, and that's just the electronic form that you saw me submit earlier. But let's use an example here of, Dan. We've noted that he has had many interactions and many investigations against him, many incidents that have taken place. So if we needed to maybe give Dan a nudge in the right direction and put him on a performance improvement plan to set expectations towards what we, expect his behavior to be like going forward, we can actually generate that document directly from the case. So I can choose compose. I can choose to compose a performance improvement plan. This is with our document composition tool. It's pulling from a library of templates and prompting me to add information that OnBase will then use to generate that document. So how many days has Dan been unproductive? We'll say 30. I say okay, and what OnBase is going to do is automatically generate that document for me. So a performance improvement plan is going to be created right here from the case. I'll be able to view this performance improvement plan. OnBase is going to highlight for me the areas that it automatically entered in. Like for instance, we typed in 30 days. So OnBase is going to highlight that 30 days for me, add Dan's name, customize this to be specific for him. And when we're ready, we can again use workflow on the back end to accept that case. That case is going to be uploaded to documents. So if we went back up to our documents up here, there's that performance improvement plan. Now that's a part of the documents in Dan's case. And if we had more time for a longer demonstration, I'd probably show you that performance improvement plan was just automatically emailed out to Dan in an automated notification with an attachment, and he can use workflow to acknowledge that document, or you could even leverage DocuSign to sign that document as well. So not only can we, capture the documents associated with the case, but we can also create documents that might need to be associated with this case as well. In addition, we talked about related employees earlier. You'll notice I have a couple different tabs on this case. I have the ability to add related employees. So if there was somebody who was a witness on this case, I have the ability to use a lookup to find individuals. We'll say Frank Moore was a witness. I'm going to save this, and now he's been added as a witness in the case. If I had someone else who needed to be added as a related employee to this case, I could capture that here. Again, maybe this is someone's manager that needs to be captured. We could again add that employee, and now they're going to be tracked as someone who was related to this case, and that's something that we'll be able to report on later. I also have the ability to add activities. So when we go to activity log, here's where we've talked a lot about the documents, and we've talked about some of the data that we're collecting and the reporting, but a lot of times it's important to track activities that have happened on this case as well. So here's where we can say, all right, I had a call with Dan yesterday. I'd like to track this call. I'm the one that completed the call, and I'm going to save this in the system, right? Or maybe I want to add another activity to say, I have a meeting that is scheduled, with Dan on Monday. So we'll say meeting on Monday. I'm going to be the one that's completing this meeting. I'll save this, and here's all my notifications coming in on the right-hand side of the screen. But now I've recorded, that I'm going to have that meeting. If maybe I sent a follow-up email a couple weeks ago that I want to record in the system, here's where I'm able to track that. I can say, all right, I sent a follow-up email, or I executed a PIP, or I talked to someone just kind of in a stop and chat on the fly, and I can record all of that here within OnBase so that we're tracking all the activities that are associated with the case, and you can see that list here. If you'd rather see that list on a calendar view, you can do that within the tool as well. So I'm going to just go up to calendars, and what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to present, I can view the week, I can view the month, and here now I can view in a quick snapshot everything, all the activities that have taken place surrounding this case. So I'm able to say, all right, well, most of the activity took place at the beginning of the month. Maybe this is someone I need to follow up with, someone I need to touch base with to make sure that they are, feeling like we're working on this case. Or maybe I have an upcoming meeting that, I want to remind myself of. I can see that here. I can add favorites as well. If there are favorite cases that you'd like to work on, that you'd like to be presented to you, you'll notice I have a My Inbox here where I can see just the cases that I'm supposed to work on. I have the ability to also make cases favorites. So if I select this case and I make it a favorite, you'll notice that OnBase is going to present me with my favorites on the left-hand side of the screen. So we do have the ability to, showcase that information for you through this view as well. And then at any time, we can go back to our filters, present the information in the filtered view. We can also, if we needed to, we could go and have that dashboard view or drill down further in the cases as well. So I want to just pause briefly and see if there are any questions that came through. Hopefully that was a good overview of what this solution could look like.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. So we do have a couple questions that came through. The first one is there a supervisor dashboard that collects filter information from an entire HR team?
You could certainly create that. Yep. Everything you see here, this is just an example of how this can look. So when you saw me create that filter on the fly, I could absolutely create a filter that showed me, what every individual's HR is working on, how many cases they have, what the status of those cases are, what the average time to close is. That's something that could absolutely be created with this tool in the system, yes.
Okay, perfect. And another one is, if you accidentally click on close case, can you undo that?
It's always the anxiety over accidentally closing things. I know, yes. If you certainly, the way that we saw searching for cases earlier, if you closed that case, you could search for that case again, pull it back up, and you could have a workflow task maybe that was open case, and you could certainly reopen a case if you wanted to. I mean, that's just one way I can think of to get around that, but absolutely, I mean, if you close a case, it wouldn't necessarily be a done deal. We would have, we could certainly create workarounds for that in the system.
Okay, perfect. And we have a couple of questions around email, so I'll kind of put those into one question. Can you import emails, and how do you attach Outlook emails and/or pictures to an open case?
Sure. So absolutely, email can be a big part of an employee relations investigation. So there are many different ways to do that. I mean, you can use our Outlook integration tool to be able to upload directly from email. So you could be, viewing an email, click upload from that email, and that email can be uploaded. Any attachments to that email can be uploaded as well, and those could be, made a part of the case as well. Sometimes there's like a general email box that things might come into, and if those emails that come in, like hr@onbase.com, right? If we had a general email, we do have tools to be able to pull, those emails and kind of create a template to say, all right, we know that when this email comes in, we can grab that information and automatically index that as well. So there's different tools that you can use. It would really depend on the use case. I'd have to understand that a little bit more, but absolutely, email is a big part of it, and that's something that, you can upload in multiple ways into OnBase and attach to the case.
Okay, awesome. And another one just came through regarding mail. Is Google Mail supported?
So right now, and that's something that we, might want to, we could always get back to you on exactly, what integrations we have with the different email systems, but our prime integration is with Outlook. And so that's where you would be able to use that Outlook integration tool to upload emails. But there are different tools that you could use if you needed to add documents or emails into the system. I'm thinking of even our virtual print driver tool that you can virtually print documents into the system. So there are ways that we can support the capture of emails, from any system. It's just that we have that integration specifically built out with Outlook at this time.
Okay, perfect. And also, do you have the ability to load previous cases from systems such as Oracle PeopleSoft?
I mean, certainly our case management solution has the ability to use data from other systems. I think that that's something that I'd want to understand more about. I'm not familiar with any employee relations process that would be in PeopleSoft. We'd want to understand what kind of data is in there and how we could get that into OnBase and what would be important to include as part of the case. That's something that, I would want to do a deeper dive on before I made any recommendations, because we have tools to do those types of things. It just really depends on the needs of that specific customer and that specific process.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Those are all the questions.
Okay, well, we're right up on 3, and that never happens. So thank you all for your time today.
Thank you so much for presenting, Maria. That was great.